Solving linear inequalities is very, very similar to solving regular equations, but they're not exactly the same. The exception comes when you multiply or divide each side of an inequality by a negative number. Let me show you a little example here. If I were to write 1 is less than 3, hopefully everyone would tell me that that's a true statement. 1 is less than 3. Well, remember, whatever we do to one side of an inequality, we have to do to the other, just like an equation. So if I took my 1 is less than 3 here, and I chose to multiply each side by 2, I would get 2 times 1, which is 2, and 3 times 2, which is 6. And why 2? Well, that's just a random number I picked. You can multiply it by whatever you want. Does our inequality hold? Is 2 less than 6? Sure. If you decided not to use a 2 and you decided to multiply by 10, whatever you do to one side, you do to the other, and you'd get 10 times 1, which is 10, and 3 times 10, which is 30, and oh look, we can bring our inequality straight down. 10 is still less than 30. So our inequality holds when we multiply by a positive number. Let's look at when we multiply by a negative number. If we have 1 is less than 3, still a true statement, but let's say I wanted to multiply each side by a negative 2. Now, look at what happens. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Does our inequality hold? Is negative 2 less than 6? Last time I checked on the number line, negative 2 was to the right of negative 6 on the number line. That means negative 2 is not less than negative 6. Negative 2 is actually greater than negative 6. So this is the only exception to solving a linear inequality is the exact same way as solving a regular equation. When you multiply or divide each side of an inequality by a negative number. It has nothing to do with the fact whether your answer is negative or anything like that. It's what you're doing. If you're multiplying by a positive number, it stays the same. If you multiply by a negative number, you have to reverse the inequality symbol. Basically, flip it over. So if you multiply or divide each side of an inequality by a negative number, flip the inequality symbol over. Let's look at an example. It says solve the inequality and graph its solution. Well, again, before we can graph, we have to solve this. P divided by 2 is less than or equal to negative 2. Well, still follow your steps for solving equations. What are we solving for? P. What do we have to get rid of? The 2. How do we get rid of the 2? Well, since we're dividing, we do the inverse. We multiply. So we're going to multiply each side by 2. We're going to see that these 2's cancel out, and we're left with P. But before I bring down the inequality symbol, I'm going to come over here and have negative 2 times 2, which is negative 4. Before I bring down the inequality symbol, I'm going to ask myself one more question. Did I multiply or divide by a negative number? Well, don't get caught up in the idea that this is a negative 4. Go back to what you did. You multiplied by a positive 2 to each side. Since you multiplied by a positive 2, your symbol stays the same. Remember, if you multiply by a positive number, your inequality holds true. Doesn't matter that this is negative. If you multiply by a positive number, your inequality stays the same. Graphing. Remember, we graph just like we've been practicing. Circle on the number line at the number, so at negative 4. Decide if it's open or closed. Since it can be equal to, it's closed. And we're talking about all the values less than negative 4. Well, the values to the left of negative 4 are less. So you draw your arrow that way. So solution, graph. Let's look at this next example. We have a negative 2.5 times y is greater than 3. So negative 2.5 times y is greater than 3. Follow your steps for solving an equation. What are we solving for? Y. What do we have to get rid of? Negative 2.5. How do we get rid of it? Since it's multiplication, we do the inverse. We divide. And we know now that we have to divide by a negative 2.5. If we don't divide by a negative 2.5, this doesn't cancel out to become 1. Whatever we do to one side, you do to the other. So negative 2.5 divided by negative 2.5 is 1y. 3 divided by a negative 2.5 is going to be a negative 1.2. Now, before you bring your inequality down, you say, did I multiply or divide by a negative number? Yes, you did. You divided by a negative 2.5 to each side. If you divide by a negative, or if you multiply by a negative, take your inequality and just flip it over. Instead of saying greater than, you say less than. Then, if you wanted to graph it, negative 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, negative 1.5. Again, I'm not expecting a lot out of the graphs. We graph it the same way. Circle on the number line at the number. Decide if it's open or closed. This is open. And we're talking about all the values less than negative 1.2. So we're talking about all the values to the left. So when solving inequalities, they really are similar to solving equations. The only thing you have to be careful of is anytime you multiply or divide by a negative number, you must flip your inequality symbol over.